Alright, good morning YouTube. I thought we'd go over today about how to set up Nitrous on the Terminator X. Now this is my friend Jay Gross's car. Alright, it's a third gen. He put a 5.3 in, and previously he had it running on carburetor and the MSD 6010 box. So we're gonna go ahead and open this up. Now, Jay put the Terminator on, but still has a single plane intake with fuel injectors for port injection and an AccuFab throttle body. It's pretty neat. So first thing we go into, we're going to go into fuel, and he made this fuel map with the wizard, and then with the learn table, it took quite a bit of fuel out after he adjusted the fuel pressure up. The next thing is that he's using the 1-bar internal map sensor. Now that's mostly because he's got a single plane intake from Holley that is split, and he had some issues trying to put in the regular map sensor in there. So he just ran a hose with a barb straight into the little blue internal map sensor. Alright, next thing we're going to go into is the system. And again, he's using these Deca 60-pound injectors. Next big thing in here, we've got his one fan set to turn on at 195 degrees and turn off again at 180 degrees. And then we're using the plain Jane two-step from the staging control. Alright, so now that we're in the spark tab, his spark table is a little bit different than what a lot of you guys are going to have, and that's mostly based on his experience with the carburetor and the MSD box, and just trying to match up as much as he could for to mirror back and forth. Now this isn't a street car. This is a drag car only, like a no headlights type race car. So he doesn't really need the timing table like a lot of your street cars. I mean, as you see, he's got 36 degrees in over half the cells here, and that's fine. That's working for him. But the big things is under rev limiter, we have his high side set to 7200 and his two-step at 3000. Again, that's mostly based on trying to mimic what he had going on with his carburetor. And then for his input, we have rev limiter 1 as a ground. Next thing here, excuse me, I had to top off on the coffee again. We got coffee this morning instead of Crown because, well, it's Saturday morning. So, big thing on the nitrous side, Jay's using a wet kit. He's got about a 200 jet, and that was on the car for as long as I've known Jay. So, again, we're trying to get him off the carburetor and into here. So what we have here set up is activates a wet nitrous kit. Input 1 we have to disable the stage. Now that is because his input 1 is going to be his trans brake. So whenever he's on the brake, his nitrous is disengaged. Okay, so under here, under activation, deactivation, we have the TPS trigger at 90%, the minimum RPM at 3000, the maximum at 7000, and then we're not using any delay. Now, one thing we noticed when I was over there trying to help him set this up and just iron out some little deep issues was that we were doing this with the engine off and ignition on, engine off, and we could not get the nitrous to engage at 90%. We were only able to get it at about 50%. Now, what we ended up figuring out, he got in touch with that Devon guy, is that the engine ignition on, engine off, is that it thinks that if you floor the car, you're trying to start it with a flooded motor. So it was disengaging everything. That's what we learned. Alright, his AFR, we have it to cut off at 13 internal and also off at 10-0 air-fuel ratio. His timing retard, again, we're mimicking what he did with the car-rated setup, but with his 200 shot, we wanted it to be about 20 degrees of timing, and then we also wanted his closed loop to run at 12-0 air-fuel ratio. So then we're going to go to inputs and outputs. He has his enable as a 12 volt. That nitrous enable, his arm switch, is on a toggle switch that also powers standalone fuel cell pump. So he's running around on a regular fuel pump. He hits his arm switch. It arms the nitrous in the Terminator and also turns on his auxiliary fuel, his nitrous fuel. And then nitrous, the output, this input rather, is a ground, and that is going to go to his trans brake, or it's on the same input as his trans brake. And then nitrous stage out is PWM. And now what we found here is, again, we're having some problems. So what we found was that it needed to be a solid state relay, the same as what we had set up for his trans brake. It didn't want to be on the regular Bosch, 40 amp clicker deal. It wanted to be on solid state relay, and we'll cover that in a little bit. Okay, so in inputs, we have input 1 is nitrous fuel pressure. It's a 5 volt sensor, right? And we configured it right in here. We set Holley 1600 psi, but it's actually a low dollar motorsports sensor that configures the exact same as this Holley sensor. Then where it's used, we have it set as a bottle heater trigger. Now the outputs, we have a nitrous bottle heater. Now I think Jay has gone away from this setup, but it's there if he wants it. It's just how we set it up. This is kind of copying Apple over at Sloppy, how he did his. So here's what we did. We have it as a switched input, so this will activate when he turns on the nitrous and the engine's running. It's above 500 RPM, which is anything off the starter. And it will also activate whenever the bottle pressure is below 900 psi and deactivate when it's at above 1100 psi. Jay rolls through the beams, or rolls into the beams, arms his nitrous. Boom, Bob's your uncle. Or he could do this back in the pits, working up his bottle pressure, and then after he does burnout, purge off the excess. So that's how we did his bottle heater setup. All right, now that we're in we're done in the input output table, we're gonna go over to the pin map. Now we have his input 1 is his nitrous pressure, his input 3 as his nitrous arm switch, and then input 4 as his 2-step, his trans brake, and also the nitrous disarm, or his disable. So finishes burnout, enables the nitrous, rolls in the pre-stage beam, then into the stage beam, and then he goes He hits his trans brake button, brings him up onto the brake, onto the brake, onto the converter, his two-step, and disables his nitrous. Let's go with the brake, and immediately is on the bottle. That's how we set that up. Then under outputs, we've got his fan on input 1. Input 2 is a staging output that goes to his trans brake. Now, if you are a little confused on how to do the trans brake on these cars, or with this ECU, the Terminator X, go ahead. I've got a video that I made a few weeks ago on how I did it on my car. Output 3 has got his nitrous output. Again, that's PWM. So in order to get that working, we had to use a solid state relay. The NOS part number is 15620. And that's that same 3-wire deal that I have used for my trans brake. And then lastly, output 4 is for his bottle heater. Again, I don't think that he's using that anymore. I think he went back to a toggle switch in a regular deal. But it's available there if he wants to go back, or if you guys want to copy this. And lastly, before I go, he's doing some pretty neat stuff with the gauges here. So Jay has got a tablet for a dash instead of, like on my car, I have the Holley Pro Dash. Jay's using a tablet, and he's got this all set up, all kind of, to suit his needs for that. He may pipe up if people have some questions. I know he's subscribed on here, but just real quick, that's all I wanted to go over about how to set up Nitrous on the Terminator X.